Welcome to Funmileo Marianne TV. The air hung heavy, thick with humidity and the stench of decay. The jungle was alive, but not with the sounds of nature. Instead, it was a cacophony of distant gunfire and the cries of the wounded. The oppressive atmosphere seemed to seep into the very soul of anyone who dared to enter. Gunfire echoed in the distance, a grim symphony of chaos and destruction. The sounds of battle were relentless, a constant reminder of the violence that plagued this forsaken land. Each shot fired was a testament to the brutality that had become the norm. This was no ordinary battlefield. It was a place where the rules of engagement were blurred and the lines between right and wrong were indistinguishable. The ground was stained with the blood of countless souls, each one a casualty of a war that seemed to have no end. This was a playground for the rich and ruthless, where war was a commodity and life itself was a bargaining chip. Here, power and money dictated the course of events, and those who had neither were left to fend for themselves in a brutal game of survival. This was the island ruled by Colonel Tony, a dictator who held his people hostage in a gilded cage of fear and oppression. His iron-fisted rule was marked by cruelty and corruption, and his subjects lived in constant terror of his wrath. The island was a microcosm of his twisted vision of power. Hidden amongst the lush vegetation and crumbling colonial architecture, a diverse group of players converged. Each one had their own reasons for being there, and each one brought their own set of skills and experiences to the table. They were a motley crew, united by a common goal but divided by their own personal agendas. There were mercenaries, hardened by years of fighting in the world's most dangerous corners. These soldiers of fortune were driven by the promise of wealth and the thrill of the hunt. They were ruthless and efficient, willing to do whatever it took to achieve their objectives. CIA operatives lurked in the shadows, their allegiances fluid, and their motives shrouded in secrecy. They played a dangerous game of espionage and manipulation, always one step ahead of their enemies. Their presence added an extra layer of complexity to an already volatile situation. And then there were the civilians caught in the crossfire, their lives upended by a conflict they never asked for. They were the innocent victims of a war that had nothing to do with them, yet they bore the brunt of its horrors. Their stories were ones of loss and resilience, of hope and despair. In the heart of this maelstrom, one man stood apart. He was a solitary figure, a beacon of determination amidst the chaos. His presence was a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there were those who refused to give up. His name was Mark, a former soldier stripped of his rank and haunted by the ghosts of his past. He carried the weight of his mistakes on his shoulders, and the memories of his fallen comrades haunted his every step. He was a man on a mission, driven by a need for redemption. He had come to this godforsaken island seeking redemption, or perhaps just a way to numb the pain that gnawed at his soul. The jungle was both his sanctuary and his prison, a place where he could confront his demons and find a way to make peace with his past. But in this dangerous game, every move was a gamble, and the only guarantee was that survival would come at a heavy price. The stakes were high, and the consequences of failure were dire. Mark knew that he would have to navigate this treacherous landscape with caution, for one wrong move could mean the difference between life and death. Mark ran a calloused hand across the worn stock of his rifle, feeling the grooves and scratches that told stories of battles fought and lost. The cold steel was a familiar comfort in this alien landscape, a reminder of the life he once knew, now a distant memory. Dishonorably discharged, they called it. A label that carried the weight of his failures and the judgment of his peers. A stain on his record that followed him like a shadow, darkening every step he took and every decision he made. The details were a blur of bad decisions and blurred lines, moments of chaos where right and wrong became indistinguishable. A mission gone wrong that had cost him everything, his honor, his comrades, and his sense of self. Now he was a soldier for hire, selling his skills to the highest bidder, a mercenary in a world that had no place for him. He had tried to outrun his past, to leave behind the ghosts that haunted him, to bury the memories beneath cheap whiskey and meaningless encounters, hoping to drown the guilt that gnawed at his soul. But the guilt lingered, a constant ache in his chest, a reminder of the lives lost and the promises broken. The face of the young recruit, his eyes wide with fear in his final moments, haunted Mark's dreams, a specter of his failures. Joining this ragtag group of mercenaries and thrill-seekers wasn't about justice or ideology. It was about survival, about finding a place where he could belong, even if only temporarily. The money promised by their mysterious benefactor was enough to start over, to buy a new identity and a chance at redemption, to disappear and try to rebuild the life he had shattered, to find a way to make peace with his past. But as he looked around at his companions, a motley crew of adrenaline junkies and ruthless killers, he couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. Mark couldn't shake the feeling that he was in way over his head, that this path he had chosen was fraught with danger and uncertainty. And something about their mission, to overthrow a dictator, felt unsettlingly familiar. It echoed the mistakes of his past, the blurred lines and moral ambiguities that had led to his downfall. As he stared at the old photographs, memories of his former comrades and the life he once had flooded back, he wondered if he could ever truly escape the shadows of his past. Determined to be better, to not repeat the same mistakes, Mark trained relentlessly, honing his skills and preparing for the challenges ahead. He wrote letters he would never send, pouring out his regrets and hopes, trying to make sense of the man he had become. In the quiet moments, as the sun rose over the desolate landscape, he found a sliver of peace, a fleeting hope that maybe, just maybe, he could find redemption. Standing at a crossroads, Mark knew that the path ahead was uncertain, but he was determined to face it head on, to fight for a future where he could finally lay his past to rest. The world had grown numb to suffering. The endless wars, the famines, the refugee crises, they had become just another news cycle, easily digested and quickly forgotten. So the ultra-wealthy, those jaded souls who had tasted every pleasure and conquered every mountain, sought new thrills, new ways to feel alive. And they found it in the most unlikely of places, the battlefield. Extreme tourism, they called it. A chance to experience the ultimate adrenaline rush, to stare death in the face and emerge victorious. For a hefty price, companies like the one that had hired Mark offered a chance to play soldier, to participate in mock battles and live-fire exercises, all with the safety net of knowing it wasn't real, or at least that's what they told themselves. These weekend warriors, with their designer camouflage and state-of-the-art weaponry, were a constant source of amusement and disdain for the mercenaries. Men like Mark, who had seen the true face of war, knew that there was nothing glamorous or exciting about taking a human life. But the money was good, and in this twisted game, morality was a luxury they could ill afford. The iron fist of Colonel Tony. Colonel Tony. The very name sent shivers down the spines of the locals. He had seized control of the island years ago, promising prosperity and order. Instead, he had delivered only tyranny and despair. His regime was built on fear and enforced by a ruthless militia that answered only to him. The island, once a paradise of pristine beaches and verdant jungles, was now scarred by conflict. Checkpoints, manned by bored, trigger-happy teenagers, were a constant reminder of Tony's iron grip. The airwaves were filled with propaganda, extolling the virtues of the colonel and denouncing the foreign agitators who sought to undermine his rule. But beneath the surface, resentment simmered. Whispers of rebellion echoed in the bustling marketplaces and crowded bars. The people yearned for freedom, for a chance to reclaim their lives and their future. But fear was a powerful silencer, and hope was a dangerous thing to cling to in a place like this. A web of lies. Trust was a currency more valuable than gold in this treacherous environment. In a place where the line between friend and foe was blurred, trust was the most precious commodity. It was a fragile thing, easily shattered by the slightest hint of deception. Every smile could be a mask, every friendly gesture a prelude to betrayal. The air was thick with suspicion, and every interaction was a potential trap. Mark had learned the hard way that in this world appearances were deceiving. Mark watched his companions closely, his senses on high alert. He had to be vigilant, always ready for the unexpected. The desert was an unforgiving place, and only the most cautious survived. The mercenaries, a motley crew of ex-military and mercenaries from all corners of the globe, were united only by their greed and their willingness to kill for a living. They were a dangerous bunch, each with their own agenda and loyalties that could shift with the wind. The CIA operatives were even more enigmatic. Their true intentions were hidden behind layers of secrecy and misdirection. They were masters of manipulation, always playing a game of shadows. Their true loyalties were a mystery, their objectives shifting like the sands in the desert. One moment they seemed to be allies. The next they were pursuing their own hidden agendas. It was impossible to know where they stood. They spoke in riddles, their words laced with double meanings and hidden agendas. Every conversation was a puzzle, every statement a potential lie. Mark had to read between the lines, deciphering their true intentions. Mark knew they were using him just as they were using everyone else on this mission. He was a pawn in their game, a tool to be used and discarded when no longer needed. But he was determined to turn the tables. The question was, who would they discard first when their usefulness had run out? In this world, loyalty was a fleeting thing, and survival depended on staying one step ahead of the game. Even the wealthy tourists, eager for their taste of adrenaline, were not to be trusted. They were thrill seekers, drawn to danger like moths to a flame. Their presence added another layer of complexity to an already volatile situation. Their motivations were as varied as their backgrounds, but they all shared one thing in common: a reckless disregard for the consequences of their actions. They were here for the thrill, oblivious to the danger they were courting. They had come to this island seeking adventure, but their presence only served to complicate an already volatile situation. Their actions could tip the balance, turning a tense standoff into a full-blown conflict. In this pressure cooker of paranoia and suspicion, alliances were fluid and betrayals were inevitable. Trust was a rare commodity, and everyone was looking out for themselves. Mark had to navigate this treacherous landscape, always wary of the knife in the dark. Mark knew that he could trust no one, not even his own instincts. He had been betrayed before, and the scars ran deep, but he had learned from his mistakes, and he was determined not to be caught off guard again. He had been played before, and he was determined not to let it happen again. This time, he would be the one pulling the strings, the one in control. In this web of lies, he would be the spider, not the fly. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe for more videos.